Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through writing an Android app. It'll just be a really very simple sort of 101 Android class, and it'll give you the idea of what you need to do to write an app. So, where you got to, if you attended the presentation before, can you guys hear me at the back? Yeah. Sweet. So if you attended the presentation before, what you want to do is you just want to go to Google and you go just type Android developers, cool, and then just go to the first link, and it'll hit. You'll land on this page, and then you've got to hit the developer tab. So you go to developer, and then just down here is Android training. So this is, if you're by yourself and you want to give it a shot, start at this building your first app. If you're sort of not so newbie, you can probably start at the advanced training, and that's pretty cool. There's some cool stuff like location-aware stuff. So you go getting started, you go building your first app down here, and then you need to install the Android SDK. Now, if you got Linux or a Mac, it's a bit easier in a sense that you don't need drivers for your device. So if you've got a device, it's a positive, it's a plus. You can actually plug your device into your computer. If you've got a Windows computer, you're going to have to get the drivers for that. But Mac and Linux, you don't need drivers for your devices, which is it's a bit more handy than Windows. But Windows is just as good to develop on. So you install the SDK. So we'll go there and just have a look at that. So you've got to download it from here. It says download. You just go, your computer, your type of computer you're using, it'll go download for Windows if you're on a Windows or whatever. Download for Linux, download for Mac, and you just download it, and it downloads to a little zip, and you unzip it, and then I'll show you, I'll go through the file system, I'll show you. So, this is where I store my SDK in here. So you unzip it and it looks like this. And then what you do is you run Android here on Tools. So once you've unzipped it, go to the Tools folder and then just go Android. And it'll load the SDK manager. And that's what you need to do to get started, basically. So you start doing that, and then it fetches all the stuff from the repository. And what you need is you just need to get, for the time being, you need to get Android SDK tools. And so click all the tools part, and then choose (2.1). You don't want to go any lower than Android 2.1. And by what I mean by that is if you go to the website and you have a look at the distribution, it's called Dashboard, Android. Dashboards. So if you have a look here, I don't know if I can zoom in, if it's zoomed up enough. All right, there we go. So if you have a look here, 1.5 and 1.6 are relatively insignificant. I don't know if any of you guys have that on your devices. Maybe an Eastern Bloc nation that hasn't seen Android upgraded for a couple of years, or if you're with some crappy provider that doesn't update your phone very often. But basically the idea is that you don't need to provide support for any of these versions that are less than 1%. So we're starting with 2.1. So we download the 2.1 and the tools, all right? So you do that, you let it run, it's all good, done, finished. And what you do then is you download Eclipse. So you want Eclipse IDE. Eclipse IDE is the tool that you use to write your Android apps in. And you just go to here, download Eclipse. And then you just get the classic version here. So there'll be some sort of a binary, whether it's an exe file or a Mac file or a Linux deb or RPM or whatever you're using. And you just download that there, the simple classic one. So you've downloaded the SDK, you've downloaded Eclipse, you've run Android from the terminal in the SDK folder. Then you start up Eclipse. And in Eclipse, you're going to add a repository to it. So once Eclipse is there, you just go install new software. And then you look, so you click add there. I'll show you what I've added already. But you add, this is all, by the way, all these instructions, if you don't get it now from me, are all on this Android site that I was telling you about. So this one here. So you go get the Android SDK. And once you've done that, then you go install the SDK. And then you can explore, and that's got their little steps and all that stuff. So then, and then it says Eclipse, exploring NDK, installing the Eclipse plugin. So that's where we're at. We're at installing the Eclipse plugin. And that's the plugin there. And you just add it. And then you go, and once it's added, these little guys will pop up here. And you just click in. I don't do any NDK developing. So for starters, if you're interested in developing an Android app in C or C++, as our friend was telling us before, you probably want to download the NDK plugins. For me, I haven't tried it. What you do is you just get the developer tools, and then you click Next and OK and Finish, and it'll download and install them for you. And then it'll restart Eclipse. And once you've restarted Eclipse, with all that done, you get these two little icons up here. Remember how we started? We ran Android from that tool folder. Well, this is the same thing. It opens the Android SDK. Now this is embedded into your Eclipse development environment, and you can run all that from Eclipse. So now we're just about ready to start writing an Android app. Don't let what I've just, like the technical shit, excuse me, the technical stuff that I've gone through. All right, cool. Regardless, I should watch my French. The technical stuff scare you away. If you're worried about all that technical stuff that I was doing, like I said, develop Android training, and it will have all the steps for you, from building your first app to installing the SDK to adding the platform packages, installing Eclipse, next steps. So now we have it all installed. And what you want to do, right, like I was saying to you before, you want to target 2.1 up to Jelly Bean, which is 4.1.1 as of today. So what I've done is I've installed everything between, I don't think I've got, so as you see, I've got not installed, no, hang on, where am I? Yeah, so 1.6, I've actually done 1.6 because I was testing another app of mine, but I don't have any 1.5 stuff installed. The cool thing about Android is using Google Apps, using Google Maps. So to use Google Maps, you do need to make sure you get this Google API. Once you got that, once you got it all, you just start your first Android app. It's as easy as this. You just go right-click, New, Android Application Project. The recent Google I/O, they released the latest Android tools, and it's just become a lot easier to write an Android app for tablets or for phones with these wizards that it gives you. So we're going to call this, let's just call it Computer Games Bootcamp Map. You don't need to change anything else. You can leave that. I might just get rid of that underscore there. And we want 2.1 to 4.1. And we need to actually make this the Google, because I'm doing a map, I need the Google API for the map. Create custom launcher, that's all cool. We can just leave all this as it is. And then we go next. What was that little thing up there? The prefix com examples meant as a placeholder and should not be used. Doesn't matter. Cool. You can change that to your own name, whatever you want. All right, so let's choose an icon for our app. What should we have it as? Let's have it as Android. Yeah? Sweet. Square? Yeah. Center it. So you can tweak all these little settings here, mess around with it. All right, and then next. Okay, so this is where we get to. Now, when you're writing for a phone, you're going to have just a blank activity. If you're writing for something like a tablet, you won't be able to support the SDKs below 3.0. So you're going to be using SDKs 3.0 to 4.1. And you can choose this master detail flow, and that'll give you the split pane. So that's like a list, and that's like a little map or some sort of content related to this item in the list. But today we're not going to worry about tablets. We're just going to go straight to phones because it's a fairly beginner sort of tutorial. And just click next. All right. Now this is all put in there for us. So main activity suite, navigate. We can just leave that totally as it is and go finish. And there you have it. It's basically made a whole app for me without typing one single line of code except for the name of the app. And it's just, as you see down here, it's just building it and it's loading all the data for the version of Android that it's supporting. And there you go. There's Hello World. So I've made a Hello World Android app without typing one line of code. So this view you have here, this will be relevant to ice cream sandwich and to jelly bean devices, and even honeycomb if you're running it on a tablet. And you can see with this new tools that if I go down to 2.1, we're going to lose this design pattern up here called the action bar. So this is called the action bar, and usually what you do is you drop all your icons for actions up here. And if we go back down to, where is it? If I go to 2.1, you'll see it's just rendering, but it'll lose that action bar. And there you see, it's gone. Right. So the next thing we're going to do is put a map on it. Now there's only two files in this app. There is the main activity and the main layout. So if you look at the layout here, I'll whack this back up to 4.1. And you see up here it says Hello World. If we go to the source, I'm on it. If I go to the source code here, it shows you what it is. It's an XML file. So Android defines its layouts through XML files, and that's quite handy because XML's a lot more readable than other types of languages. And you can see here it uses sort of an outside layout with a text view inside it. And that text view says Hello World. And that's it. The main activity is just dead simple too. You've got an activity called main activity, and then the first method that's run on the app when the app's opened up is this one here called onCreate. And what onCreate does is it takes the activity main, this file here, and it puts it through this method here, which displays that screen that we saw. This method here is for the action bar or for the menu. So when you are adding things to the menu, you add them to this file, but we won't be looking at that today. So we've got just two files. Very easy, not much code at all, as you can see. If I turn on line, show line numbers, you've got roughly 20 takeaway threes, 17 plus 15, what's that, 30, 40, what's that, 42. 17 plus 15 is, I'm so bad at maths, 30, 42. Yeah, am I right? 32, thank you. So 32 lines of code in that whole app, except for discounting the activity main that's in the menu. So let's have a look at it, all right? So here you've got your source code, your activity files and your source code. Here you've got your resources. So these folders take all your graphics, like your pictures and all that sort of stuff. Resources also holds the layout file, so the way the screen looks, and the menu file, so the way the menu looks. And you can store other little variables like you put your strings in there. So strings holds all the literals. So when it says Hello World, you put that in strings. And the good thing with Android is it knows what country you're in, and it will convert your strings into the country language that you're in. So it'll change that for you. That's if you have them in strings. So the next thing we're going to do is put a map on. So to put a map on, what we're going to do is we're going to rip out this text view and replace it with a map view. And I'm just going to grab my code that I've written here already and then just paste it in. So it's as simple as writing this thing here, this map view part, this block, and this is something that's a bit tricky. What you have to do is you have to get your own API key. It's very easy to do when you have the instructions, which are probably on the Google site. So if I go Google Maps API key, it'll be under the, so here you go. All you do is you follow some instructions on this site. This is for the JavaScript, we want this one here. So you just type in Google Maps Android API key. And what you do is you follow the instructions. And the instructions, somewhere on your computer you've got a debug key that you use to sign your apps when you've written them. And what you're doing is you're going to use that key to generate a number, and then you take that number, you copy and you paste it into a box that's somewhere on a Google site. Follow these instructions, you should be fine. This one is for my debug key, right? So now that I've swapped out the text view, which was hello world, for a map view and put in my debug key, I can then go back and have a look at what it looks like graphically. So you see here, hello world is missing now, and it just says map view. All right, so we're on our way to doing this. What we need to do, though, is we need to change change the activity to subclass a map view, map activity. And that's fine. What it will say is import maps. So we import the maps package, and then we need to add one more method that's unimplemented, and that works and compiles fine. And then what I can do is I can run it on I'll run it on a 2.1 because Google are yet to implement map views for anything above 3.0 for fragments. So it won't work properly on that. So I'll try to run it and see how we go. I can't guarantee it's going to work, but we hope it will. I might have to fix some things. All right, so what I just did there was I went up to here and I'm running a virtual machine. So you don't actually need an Android phone to run an Android app. You can use a virtual device. What you do is you go click new and you create a virtual device. So you can, let's say, ABD 2.1 test, and we want it to target 2.1, and then I'll put in GPS emulator. So GPS is there, we create ABD, and there we go, that's sitting there ready to use. And it says it's created it fine. So if I start that, I just remembered. One thing, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to change in the manifest, I'm going to have to change the compatibility for that. So close that, close that. Okay, so this file down here is a meta file. A meta file meaning that it has all the information, has the high-level information about your application stored in it. So it's an XML file, once again, easy to read, fairly easy to write, and it tells you basic information. So it tells you what the package name is here, the version of it, the version name, what SDK versions it uses. As I said, we're targeting the highest, Jelly Bean, and we're going right down to Eclair. And it's got information. It's got information about your activity. And it says this main activity is launched when we hit that icon. And here you can see this is me starting up the 2.1 device that I had be there before, and it's just loading it. And it's installing. It says it's installing down here. Okay, so there was an error, and I'll just go and debug it. So when you do your debugging, you use this thing here called logcat. And logcat is a readout of everything that goes on in your device or your virtual device. So I'll just try running it again. I'll clear that. It's a bit hard for me to interpret about a class not found, because I did name the class in. Let me just change. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bump it down to 2.1 so that it should.
So what is this app going to do?
It'll produce a map, and then the end goal is to find. It'll show your location wherever you are using the map. So I'll bump it down to 2.1. Sorry? Clean it? That's not a bad idea. Thanks. Yep. So a good thing to do when you do have these issues is to give the project a clean. And you can do that by going project clean here. It rebuilds the executable file, and it goes through making sure all the compatibilities are satisfied, all the dependencies are satisfied.
So is there a function that tells you what line of code your bug is at?
Yeah, it'll appear in the logcat, and then you double click on it and it should go to where your code is. So I'll just try that one more time. Clean. Change this here to target version 7. So what I'm doing is I'm restricting it right down to just version 7. I'm going to go back here and see what the problem is. Yeah, okay, so I'll try and clean it again. So this...
That's a bug, actually.
Yeah.
If you just say go ahead and do it, and forget about the errors, it might just actually do it. So just ignore that. Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
And it's got to do with the way that Eclipse is installed on your laptop, which you've probably done in about 10 minutes. It's missing links.
Yeah. Well, if all else fails, shut it down and start it back up.
That fixes it as well, actually.
Yeah.
That RID is so nuts.
Yeah, so the R file is like a, we can go and have a look at it. It's an integer file, keeps all references to all your variables in your app. Just hoping that there's no errors on this build. We'll see in a moment.
We found that it gave an error sometimes, and if you just ignored if you just went and compiled anyway, it actually it got it right for some reason.
And even if you cleaned it,
It didn't work.
Ah.
So if you just,
it tells you to edit if you go on the clean error, fix it, change it in the RID, it doesn't let you, but you have to open the RID file in a text editor.
You not...
Shut it all down.
Yeah.
And that's how I've done it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You can do it like that. You know what you can do as well? You can just go to the Jan file and just go delete
oh, okay.
as well. So if I just go delete, and then it'll regenerate itself. But there's something happening here that I'm it's changed to activity main cannot result, not a field. So it's imported Android R, which is not what we want. And try again. And if it fails, I'm probably just going to start again. It'll take me 2 seconds to get back to where we were. Android tools, clean. And project clean. Alright, let's forget about it. Let's delete it and start it fresh. It'll take 2 seconds. Sorry about that, guys. It'll be just 2 seconds. I do a more advanced tutorial on this where I do actually where I do make it so that it's compatible for all versions, and I use a third-party library, and it's a bit different. Yeah. Okay, so we're back to where we were. We'll just wait for this to generate. Yeah, yeah. I have to change that. Okay, so let's have a look at this again, and then copy paste, and then run this. Nah, it's sort of independent actually. So what you can do is you can close down Eclipse and this will still work. Wow. Yeah. Let's have a better look at that. Activity. You know why? I know exactly why. Because I am not declaring, I've got to create a map view. I've got to create a link to the map view in here. So if I go, this should fix it. Map view. Then I go here and I go, I also got to subclass that too.
Comments regarding the version of Eclipse that you use.
Yep.
And I know you just downloaded the Classic, which is, up until a little while ago, I think was the only one, well, it was the best one to get. But
yep.
I noticed that in other versions they have this embedded marketplace now.
Yep.
So there's bits of additional code that you can get, just like it's a repository that goes off to a server and gets it. And Classic was the only version that I think didn't have
it. Yeah, it's got a plug. Yeah.
This one and some of the other tools on the repository were quite good because it means you didn't have to, like, in the way it built the tool chain, it just went and got everything it needed, and you didn't have to think about it as much. I know the EE Java one that was on top of the Classic in the list, if you look on the list, if you go to get it, if you just click on that one and get that one instead, it's actually got this marketplace.
Okay, yeah.
It's all there,
yep.
It just works.
Yep. Yep.
But that's one of the most confusing things is actually which version of Eclipse to get. It's so many different versions of it.
So what I've done here just quickly is I've put in a map view. So this is a sort of a handle onto what we've written here. And it allows me to, so I've created an ID here, and then I'm referring to it here. So find view by ID, I'm calling it there. And I'll try and run it again, but just check I've got all the dependencies as well. So the maps are there, so that should work. Check out the meta file, and that's not good. It should be targeting 7 because I changed that. So a good thing with the emulator is you can choose to start it from a snapshot or save it to a snapshot. And when you do that, that's my personal app. So it's not. They're both. Yeah. Cheers. Yeah. So let's let's try. For all else fails, I'll just show you that. There you go. It's not liking it. No. So as you can see, it's touch and go with this stuff, and what I will do is I'll load up one of my projects just to show you. We've totally lost the debugger as well. Like it's not even registering anymore. Okay. So I'm going to switch workspace and just give you an idea of or show you something that is actually working instead of wasting your time here trying to debug it. Okay, so this is an app that I've written for a workshop that we've got next week, and it's pretty similar to the beginning of what we were doing before in that there's a marker on a map and it follows you around, it tells you where you are. The thing with this one though is it's a lot more advanced because I put in a database for it, and what it allows you to do is to long press on an icon, long press on the map, and drops an icon there, and then it stores that location in a database. So it uses what's called persistent storage, and when you start the phone back up again, that will be there sitting there for you. All the markers will be there, so you won't lose any markers. And it also implements proximity alerts, which is sort of a bit of a holy grail, and also they don't actually work that well because if you can imagine two circles, proximity alert is based upon your location accuracy. So if your location, if you're on a network, let's say, using 3G, your location can vary between a couple of hundred metres to a couple of kilometres. So if you can imagine two circles, one is where you put your proximity alert and you created a radius for that, and then another is your location, and you've got an accuracy radius based on that. So let's say you create a proximity alert for 1 kilometre away from the proximity. If you're using GPS, it'll probably trigger at about 1 kilometre and 5 metres or so. If you're using network, it'll trigger at about 2 kilometres or between a few hundred and a few thousand metres away. So I'll just give you a quick demonstration of this. So it's just building down here. I could have just run it here, but I just want to show you it's actually, and I want to go through a bit of the code here just to show you before like what we're trying to do. So this is the app here. That's called the action bar design pattern. This is the map, and as I showed you the map before, I'll go and show you just again, just to give you a quick reminder. The map is on this file here. And when you use an emulator, and you don't use a physical device, you need to actually spoof the address. So you go to the debugging area here, and you emulator control, and then you just send location controls. You just send it a fake GPS coordinate. So you send that to it, and as you can see, that little thing there is called My Location Overlay, and it's really easy to implement. I'll just go to the source code to give you a quick idea of how easy it is to implement. So if I look at the main activity, if I go up to the top here, so all you've got to do is you've got to create a class attribute called My Location Overlay. Then you just enable it, and then you invalidate the view, and that will enable your location to be found on a map. This button here uses a zoom control that I've created, which is, if I go to this bit of block of code here, it says if there's a location, then using the map view, I can get a controller to it that allows me to animate to it. I'll pass it. The first argument I pass it is that location from the My Location Overlay. The second argument is another thread that says if my zoom level is below a reasonable zoom level, then iteratively zoom in. So what it does is it iterates through all the zoom levels before reasonable zoom level and just zooms in. And I'll demonstrate that behaviour. I've got to spoof it again. What happens is it loses that location. So I go, and it zooms in. And if you can see, that's Google, because Google are funny guys. They put their coordinates into the emulator. So I'll just demonstrate it on a bit of a lower altitude. So go to the side and then zoom in. Hang on. And then zoom in. All right, and then I was telling you before about the database. So what I do is I long click on the map and it says place a marker, and I say OK, and then a marker's placed there. And this is using what's called an itemized overlay, and I can do it anywhere. So what I'm doing is I'm using the map view. I'm using something else called a geocoder, and what a geocoder does, so what I can do with the map view is I can put an overlay on top called a gesture overlay. The gesture overlay can register pressing on the map, long pressing on the map, flinging the map, so doing things with gestures. So I can press down on the map and it will say, OK, you're at this position on the map. And then I use those coordinates and I send them through a geocoder to the internet, which then does what's called a reverse geocode and turns the coordinates into an address. So it looks for the nearest address and it passes it back to my app. And then I ask in a dialogue, I pass the address to this little dialogue box and I say, do you want to place a marker here? And if I say OK, then it drops a marker there. And the thing OK, so when you press back on your Android app, it'll close your app. So I'll close it and I'll go back and I'll open it. And there they are. Sure, what's up?
In that dialog box,
Yep.
the address string.
It is passed back as an address, so an address type. And then what you do, it's a type of a data structure called an address. I'll show you quickly. And what you have to do is you have to turn that address into a string. So if I go to reverse geocoder task, so this is using an async task, which is a background thread. So what you're doing is at this part here where you've got do in the background, that's running in a background thread. And the reason you do that is because when you use the geocoder, it may take a long time to get that data. And with Android, you don't want to do all your stuff on the UI thread. So your user interface needs to remain free of other processing, other operations. And you pass it the geo, so there you go, there I'm passing it that geo point, so the latitude and longitude coordinates, and I'm saying get from location, so I'm getting an address from the location, and using a list of addresses, putting that into a list of addresses, and I'm using only the first item that's returned, because that's not the first item. I'm using you can get up to, if I look at the arguments to this, look at the parameters, you can get up to, I think there's quite a few you can get from it. So it returns an array of addresses that are known to describe the area immediately surrounding the given latitude and longitude. The returned address will be localized for the locale. So it returns values obtained by means of a network lookup. And the results are best guess and not guaranteed to be meaningful or correct. So it produces an array, and it says here the maximum number of addresses to return. Smaller numbers 1 to 5 are recommended. So you can get lots of addresses, but I'm only asking for one address returned so the most closest match. So that's in a list of addresses. And then what I say is after the thread's finished, I want to take that list of addresses, and if there's something in the list, and this is guaranteeing that there's something in the list, this selection clause here, then I want to take the first item from it, and I just sort of peel it off the top of the list as an address, and then I take the address apart and put it into a string. And this is the create marker dialog using the geopoint and the address. And the reason I pass the geopoints to be able to put the marker onto the map, because the map will talk in terms of geopoints, not so much addresses. You couldn't say to the map, I want you to put it on this address, and it'll just go straight away, sure, I'll put it on the address. What it will say is, what are the geopoints? So you'd have to do then you'd have to geocode instead of reverse geocoding. Okay. So I long press. So I've created a map view. Overlay, gesture overlay on top. Long press on the gesture overlay. Find the coordinates. Find the address. Pass the address back. Do I want to create a marker there? Sure. Take the geo point and another overlay called an itemized overlay, which is what you use when you put lots of markers on the map, or what you can use. And OK, and it drops that marker into the itemized overlay and then puts it on the map. And each marker's got a title and a snippet to store with it. And the title for this case is remove marker, and the snippet is the address. A bit deeper than that is storing it in the database. So I've created a database for it, and which are this sort of positions SQLite open helper. So the data model for it is this thing here, where basically every position that is in the database has an ID, an address, a latitude, and a longitude. And when I press OK to put it on the map, it creates a new item in the database for me with those attributes, so that when I come back to remove it, that's produced from the itemized overlay. I can just remove it, press OK, and then it takes it out of the database. Now, I don't know if I've implemented it in this one, but in the settings, there are proximity alerts. So proximity alerts, you can either have them, so this settings screen here, this won't be activated until this is clicked. So that's a dependency. It says radius depends on activate being enabled. So I enable it, and I can choose a radius for it. And let's say I choose 2 kilometres, or 1 kilometre is sufficient, and I go back. Hopefully that's within 2 kilometres of where... let's just, to be totally certain, just so I can show you the proximity alert working, go here, make that 5 kilometres, or 10 even. Now, when I give it a location, which will be Google again, and go send, this is one of my earlier versions. But as you can see up here, the proximity alert was fired. So I can actually go down here and show you it's still there. Alert marker notification. And I press that, and then it should open the app and go to that location. So I got a lot deeper than what I really intended to do. All I wanted to do was to show you guys what a map looks like on it and the My Location overlay. So if I go to just spoof the address again and show you what it looks like, you can see. So there, yeah, all I wanted to do was show you basically my location overlay with a map view, and it's very easy to do. All you've got to do is, like I said, download the SDK, go to Developers, Android, go to Tools, Develop, Training, and then build your first app. And then start from there and install the SDK, change it to a map view, so change the Hello World text view to a map view, and put in a My Location overlay, and that's it. You can actually have an app in your hand that when you walk around with a map, it's got a map on it, and when you walk around, it'll follow you wherever you go. So it'll always show you your location to a given accuracy. And as you can see, once you've got that under your belt, you can extend it, so you can do things like put markers on certain locations, and then you can move to making persistent storage. So never think your ideas aren't crazy, they're great. And learning how to write an app is probably, as you could see, a lot harder than, getting it working is harder than it's harder than it looks at times, but in the end it's quite rewarding to build something that works. And as you could see with the app, the alert marker, which I'll be teaching next week, it's a lot of fun, and in the end you can produce something that's quite useful and that you can extend into other things. And as things are going, you know, computers have been around for about, 60 odd years or so, and maybe bit over. And mobile apps have really only been around since the iPhone and since Android phones, so probably about 7 years. So it's a really new field of computing, and it's changing the way people live, and they're becoming so much more powerful than they ever used to be. So, so go for it, guys. And I'm sorry I couldn't get that demo to work the way I wanted, but I'm happy that you got to see some things with Android, and I hope you liked the presentation. Thank you very much.
Just a question.
Sure, questions. Yeah, sorry.
I know
Yeah.
you're using an Apple, and we moved
Yeah.
a couple of young guys here moved to Apple a while ago. We found so many problems with PCs, and Eclipse was just
Yeah.
a nightmare. Whereas actually, someone made a comment why using Apple, but that was one of the reasons why we found it much better.
Yeah.
Actually, whatever reason,
Yeah.
it just worked.
Yeah, well, the thing with using Windows is if you have an Android device, you're going to have to install all the drivers, and it's a different system. Apple uses a Unixy sort of thing, and Linux is actually probably even better. Yeah, but the problem is you're not going to have polished apps like you do, and the app support. So if you want app support, Apple is a very good platform, but things like Android, for example, there are a lot more apps coming out for Android as well recently. So if you getting down to mobile devices, Android devices are really taking off big time because of the fact that OEMs can just take the source code and port it to their device, whereas Apple's a lot more closed in that sense. But you can still, as far as developing on Apple devices is concerned, yeah, I don't think there's anything better, really. Besides Linux, if you like.
Have you done anything else other than Android? Are you using any Apple?
I just got an iPad about a couple of months ago, and I was thinking I want to port my award-winning app to iPad, but we'll see. I'm really busy, so I don't know if I've got the time to.
Are you surprised how much it doesn't crash?
It doesn't crash. Yeah. Well, the thing is though, when I actually have it running on my device, it doesn't crash, and when I'm not doing live demonstrations, it doesn't crash. So yeah.
Yeah, it's just when that always happens.
Yeah. Sure.
What do you think about HTML5 apps?
Great. Really good.
Better than native, or I know you can port a lot of the JavaScript written apps to native now.
Well, it depends on your use case, really. And I'll show you. This is like in the presentation in the main stage. I spoke about this thing that I did, and this is something in HTML5 that I wrote. This is a web app that I wrote. And originally this was on an Android phone, so I used a web view. So you saw how the hello world was a text view and the map was a map view. You can do what's called a web view, and you can do all that in it. And it depends on your use case. The good thing about HTML5, I find, is that the changes are server side. So all your customers that are using your product, all the changes that happen to their app happen all at once on your server, and you can deploy that immediately. So that's centralized, and the fragmentation issues are good like that too. The other thing though, the reason why I stopped using the HTML5 web interface for it, as you can see, it's even got the Android zoom buttons down here and stuff, right? So the reason why I stopped using this was because it relied on the network. It was slow, right? So that's a matter of infrastructure, and we're getting the NBN coming in soon, and so when the infrastructure improves, definitely, there's some really cool stuff you can do with that.
I'm running an app that's using local storage now to store the entire app in local storage.
Oh yeah.
My other question was,
Sure.
how do you determine what is the most important information? Because on a computer you can have like thousands of records of data.
Yeah.
On a phone you can only have 10 showing at once.
I'm not sure if I understand your question properly. But
So if you were going to write a data for the app,
Yeah.
how would you define the most important information?
for the presentation of the
Yeah.
app, like
Yeah.
what do you need to show the
Yeah.
user as being most important? Well, the user interface is really important. A lot of if you're using a lot of data that's heavy, you can run multiple threads.
Right.
So you can do a lot of background. Using async tasks is the way to go.
Right.
It really is. Yeah. So you want to offload anything that would disturb the user experience
Yep.
onto a background thread.
Right.
Does that answer your question? All right, cool. Yeah. A lot of database stuff does require synchronous syncing, so your database can become corrupt if you don't. It's all right, guys. Database can become corrupt if you don't make sure that entry points and exit points are obeyed properly. So, for example, with that app I was running before, I opened the database in a higher level class. So Android has activities, right? Yeah. And there's another class called an application class, which is what I use to open and close the database. Yeah. And that application class is, the Google developers say, they talk away from it. They say, it's probably not a good idea to use that. But I find it really handy as an access object for the database, the DAO, yeah. So you can get away with little tricks like doing things like that. Yeah. Any more questions from anyone? Yes. Sorry.
That you did a lot of apps like on mapping and all that.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried doing a game sort of app or different sort of?
You know, I haven't actually. For the computer games bootcamp, I loaded up a few, and that's something that you should look at. The SDK. I'll show you really quickly now. If you guys got just a minute, what I can do is just go create a new. So I create new. I go new, other, and here you just go down here. Go Android project from Android sample project. Okay. Go next, and then target the highest one, and then. JetBoy. JetBoy is a 2D scroller, and it uses the OpenGL, right? So you can use OpenGL in Android and implement your own logic. I don't know the pros and cons. I think the pros would be that you have more control over your over your game engine, but the cons would be that you'd have to rebuild it from scratch. You'd have to build everything from scratch. So there are other alternatives. There are a lot of game engines out there. There's one called Unity 3D that I was looking at that. Does it? There's a free version though.
Yeah, that's only for web.
That's only Mac and PC.
I thought there's an Android plugin for the free version.
The Android 400 and the iOS one.
And then if you want to get Pro, it's not 1,000.
Pro's costly, I heard. But I thought that the free version was. So, but the idea is that you got a sort of a CAD interface there where you can mess around with creating objects in your like with a graphic display. You can actually see boxes and turn polygons and objects around and interact and behaviours like that. So you don't have to write your own behaviours. But I'll get back to JetBoy if I can just go finish. So all you do is you click finish, and it's compiled there, and then all you do is you just go run, and you can have a look at that. The source code to that is all available to you immediately from just doing that. So you can go here, and you can actually, like if I close down this other app, and then look at JetBoy. Yeah.
Just make a comment there.
Sure.
You wouldn't. This is great for learning things.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't actually develop a game in Java, I wouldn't think. Using this technique, using all the builders like Unity 3D.
Yeah, yeah.
This would drive you crazy trying to get everything working properly.
Yeah. So this is he's right. And if you're a company, maybe you might think about it. But if you're a hobbyist, you probably want to start with an app engine. Even the big companies would pay enterprise. Yeah.
The advantage of the engine is you can retarget from Android, iOS. You can just build the game and then worry about what the target hardware is after you've developed it.
So this is JetBoy, and that's basically just a 2D scrolling game. And as you see, I haven't typed any lines of code. This emulator here, right, with the emulator, you can actually build an emulator with GPU support. So you'll be able to look at your game running on a GPU-enabled device. This one that I've got doesn't have GPU support at the moment. But as you can see, there's a 2D scrolling game, and I haven't typed any code in, and I've just pulled out a sample from the SDK. So when you start your Android stuff and you download your SDK, just do what I showed you, which is go new, Android sample code, and have a play with it. Mess around. You can mess with the source code. That's the beautiful thing. It's all sitting there, so I can change a text view to a button. There's asteroids. I can rename that and put something else in there. I could put like flying cows or something, so. I mean, that's a computer game, right? But there's other mashups. You can if you have a look at that sample code, there's things like, let's say, I want to make an NFC device app that transports songs or something. I can get NFC code here. So if I go to, well, let's say Wi-Fi Direct. That'd be good. I could pull in JetBoy, and I could make a Wi-Fi Direct, pull in that sample code, merge them together by messing around with it, and then I can play multiplayer on a Wi-Fi network. So things like that. That's the beautiful thing about this, is that it's all open there for you to just take it and just mess around with it, hack it up.